Cynthia, first off, when you think about the sexually explicit material and from the standpoint of parents and having conversations with their students and all that, like how do like what would you suggest the conversations look like? What are some thoughts that you have? I know my version of sexual, education with my parents was don't get someone pregnant, so don't have sex. I think it should be a little bit more robust than that, right? And so, like, what are some of your thoughts?
Okay, so I have lots of thoughts. I think the first thing to understand is if you haven't talked to your child about this already, and you want to, number one, I give you major props because I know this is not an easy thing to do. Number two, you have to understand at this age, even if they're grade 7, I believe that's the age range, right? Is grade 7 to grade 12. So even if they're grade 7, you are joining a conversation that has already been taking place. So that's the first thing you have to understand. The reality is these conversations start very young. The average age of first exposure to pornography online is reported to be as low as the age of 8. And even if it's not happening at 8, it's happening somewhere along that way. They're hearing it from their friends. They're seeing it online. They're seeing it in ads, wherever it may be. So if you come in and try to be the authority and the teacher and you try to right away tell them what's right or wrong, one of two things will happen. Either they are going to feel so bad about what they've already done or what they've already seen online that they're going to be really closed off. They're not going to feel comfortable to actually tell you about where they're maybe at, and some of the struggles they have. Or they are going to ignore you. They're going to dismiss you because they feel like you don't get it, you don't understand it, and you're kind of like you're late. So if you haven't had the conversation yet, my biggest recommendation is to come curious. Hey, I know you guys were talking about this at the church. What was it like? What were some of your major takeaways? Really try to ask a lot of questions and try to make this more about what they're learning, what they're understanding. And I would start there. The other thing I always say to parents is, Taylor, you and I kind of grew up in the era, and I guarantee all the parents watching this grew up in the era of the conversation about the birds and the bees, right? It was like, hey, did your dad sit you down? Did you have that conversation? But the reality is you want to play a long-term game here. You don't have one conversation where you lay down the law and you give all the rules. You want your kids to feel like anytime they have questions or they get exposed to something or they're unsure, you want them to feel like they can come and talk to you about it. And so you don't put all the pressure on that initial conversation. Get curious. Let your kids have an experience where they talk to you about sex and you don't clam up and you don't get weird and it's not awkward. And that's what's actually going to signal to them, hey, dad actually can hold his own. I didn't feel shamed about, whatever. And maybe I could come back to him. And you can even tell them, hey, you can come back to me anytime, you see something you're not sure about, anytime you hear something you're not sure about. Every parent can say that. But if you can model, hey, it's actually safe, it's okay to talk to me about this, they're going to believe you and they'll actually follow through on it. Now, the other category of parents is, of course, people that have already had these conversations. So you've been talking about sex. It's come up to some degree. That's amazing. And now you get to build on it with all the same things we just talked about. Play a long-term game. Try not to make it about do's and don'ts. Most people, especially if they've grown up in the church, most of your kids are already going to know the rights and the wrongs, but they want to hear about the challenges. They want to know about the struggles. What do you do when you're tempted and you shouldn't do the thing that you're tempted about? So at this point, the more you can insert your story and your own challenges, the better. Now, it has to be age appropriate, obviously, and you don't have to share everything, but your kids having an understanding that, hey, mom or dad struggled with this as well is life-changing. And here's why. Most parents think if I share about my shortcomings, then my kid's going to lower the bar. Not true. Number one, we all know what's right and wrong. Like I said, they already grew up with that likely instilled in them. But what happens is if you don't talk about your own struggles as a parent, but you uphold the standard and you say, yeah, no sex before marriage and don't watch pornography and blah, 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 all they feel is shame because they feel like, okay, that's the standard. Mom and dad hit that standard, but I didn't. So something's wrong with me. And if they really care about your family, they might even feel like I'm letting the family down. So when you share your shortcomings, you actually de-shame your kid. You make your kid feel like, okay, I'm normal, I'm human. It's okay to have these wrestles and have these challenges. And obviously you don't just stop there. Then you point them back, and you want to obviously share about the things that you've done to learn and to grow and to heal as well. And I think that's what makes these conversations really productive.
That's awesome. When you think about students who might, you know, potentially approach mom and dad and say, "Hey, I'm having this struggle. I'm struggling with, pornography or websites or, social media things, like going to certain profiles, like you said, going to the profile, clicking the link, leading on a rabbit trail." Now, um, I know, um, you might not necessarily love the idea of, um, different apps that you can have on your phone, because it's short term gain, right? We're looking at something more long term. But what are some things that mom and dad can do now that can help uh, students that are in the midst of that? And if there's maybe an app or something that can help, what would you suggest?
Yeah, for sure. And just to give some context, what Taylor's talking about is a lot of the messaging in the church is, just install an internet filter that'll block the thing, and then you get the report, and we wipe our hands clean. But we all know, like, especially your kids. Okay, you're talking about digital natives here, tech natives. If your kids want to get around an internet filter, trust me, they will find a way. So all of this goes back to conversation and connection. Connection is the greatest gift you can give your child in this stage of life, because what all the research shows is that the opposite of addiction, addiction to pornography, addiction to anything at all, really, is not sobriety, it's connection. Connection is the real antidote. And obviously this is incredibly biblical. So I think if your kid comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm struggling with pornography," parent brain immediately goes to the solution. Okay, we're going to get you some help. We're going to put some software on. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the first thing and the best thing you can do is say, "Thank you so much for telling me. I really means a lot to me that you would trust me with something so significant. We're in this together. Let me help you." That right there is going to be like, that's night and day difference. If you have a big reaction or anything like that, your kid might still stick around out of loyalty, but you're not going to be able to get through to them nearly as effectively. So thank them for coming to you. Don't ask tons of details like who did this, or who did you watch, or what did you watch, or what did you see. It's a conversation you could have down the road. It's not the first conversation that needs to happen. The first thing they need to hear is that you still love them, look them in the eyes, and just say, "Thank you so much for telling me. We're in this together." I think on the more practical side of things, I do think the software I just talked about a minute ago can have some purpose or some value if there's an understanding of that they're both bought in. So it can't just be your idea, but they need to also agree that this is what they want to do to some extent. Now, granted, we're talking about kids here. You're still their parent. You can still tell them this is what we're doing. I'm just saying you're going to get further in your conversations if you can say, "Hey, what do you think about installing some software so if something happens, I get a report and we can have a conversation about it." Now, again, the conversation thing is the critical piece. And it's why you have to show safety to them first. Because if you tell them, "I get the report and we'll have a conversation about it," but you shamed them and you made them feel bad and you had a big reaction, that idea is going to be a total turnoff. They're not going to want to do any of that at all. So I think something like that can be really effective. And then I think if you start to get into the details and it becomes pretty obvious that, maybe it's not just explicit material that they're watching, but maybe they're actually sexually active, or maybe there's some abuse, or there's more layers to this. That's when I would say you really need to go the avenue of professional help, get some counseling, and that sort of thing. And I would really own that. I would steer that conversation in that direction. Again, you want to make sure they shouldn't be going in kicking and screaming. But to be honest, sometimes, like, if the situation's bad enough, you might just need to do that. So those would be my two big recommendations. One other thing that I do tell to parents this age is there's an organization called Fight the New Drug, and their target is a little bit more like 18 to 24. But in an earlier season, they were doing a lot of really good stuff for parents and for younger kids. And there's a documentary called Brain Heart World. And if you go to let me make sure I'm getting that right. I believe it's brainheartworld.org. There's a documentary there that you can watch together. Yeah, it is brainheartworld.org. And that documentary is a great way to facilitate conversation and maybe even say some things that you wouldn't necessarily have the language to say yourself.
That's great. And yeah, if you're a parent and you're like, hey, you know what, like we think that our student needs some counseling around this, and some a conversation that you guys are ready to have. We have tons of resources that we can recommend you guys for counselors that are in the city and all that. And so, if that's the case, please feel free to reach out to us. Last thing I want to talk to you about with our parents is the big conversation that's happening right now. A couple of years ago, AI kind of took off, and now there's some really interesting statistics, really profound statistics in regards to relationships, sexuality, those different things. And so, I think I read the other day about 33% of Gen Z are in some sort of relationship with AI. And so, how do we have these conversations, right? Like, what can parents do? Because I don't necessarily think saying no AI is maybe the direction we should go, because the world is heading towards artificial intelligence in helping with so many different areas.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an important question. So I think if we kind of scale back a bit, if you and I were having this conversation 50 years ago, we would be talking about different things mechanically, but as far as like the biblical kind of context of this conversation, it's the exact same. Jesus is most interested in the heart. All sexual sin starts in the heart. And if you want to really fix the issue or repair the issue, you have to deal with the heart of the matter, the heart of the individual. And so what technology and the internet and now AI are doing is they are amplifying these issues that have existed in humanity for a very long time. So AI is not the enemy as much as it's an amplifier. And so I'm personally not anti AI nearly as much as I am pro connection, pro heart health and heart healing. And I think that's where you're going to see the greatest effects and the greatest transformation. Now, if you want some data or some research, there's a guy online named Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if have you seen his stuff, Taylor? Have you ever talked about him? Okay. So he's a social scientist, collected a lot of data on the impact of technology on our young people, because for a couple of years, well, really for about a decade and a half, it was the wild, wild west. We all got Facebook and Instagram and smartphones, and this was great. And yeah, I'm sure there's some harmful effects, but it can't be that bad. Well, his research came back and showed actually it is pretty bad. And his recommended kind of like, I guess, best practices are that your kid doesn't get a smartphone until they're 12, and they don't get on social media until they're 16. I think even if you abide by those things and you look after your kids having like healthy hearts, connected hearts, I think the way they engage with AI is going to be pretty healthy. I don't think you have as much to worry about. I think it's when your kids are already deep down this rabbit hole, they don't have anywhere to turn, they don't have, friends, or they don't have people they're connecting with, even maybe things at home are really difficult. I think that's when kids start to use AI for, maybe not the greatest reasons. So I think at the end of the day, the best thing a parent can do is kind of what I've been saying the whole time. I hope I don't sound too much like a broken record, but connect with your kid. Connect with your kid and really prioritize that connection. I think that's going to be the most helpful thing. I don't think restricting AI is the right thing to do, because it makes them want it more, especially at this age. And like I said, they will find ways to use it. It's better to have conversations about it. What do you guys think about AI? Is it healthy? Should it be legislated? Like, if you start to have those conversations, that's interesting for your kid. And that will actually get them thinking without you telling them. They will start to think about, yeah, what are the boundaries? Where should the lines be drawn? I think that's a better way to approach it than trying to do something hard and fast.
Well, hey, parents, we are going to be having a conversation with Sophia in a couple of weeks with our students around pornography, sexual explicit material. And so Sophia's business is all around this. And so, just let me encourage you. I know there can be some different thoughts around how the church engages in it. The reality is that their students are likely already somehow familiar with things, and so there's already a conversation that is going around it'd be great for your students to be able to sit in on a biblical conversation on what God says around sexuality and sexual explicit material. And so if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. You can also connect with Sathia. Sathia Me Sam is his Instagram. And so I encourage you to reach out either one of those ways. And then if you have any questions coming out of the material that you saw today, feel free to reach out to us. Besides that, see you guys.